Good evening. We are Northern Virginia Regional Commission. We're calling to order at by my watch 7:47. We will call the roll.
Commissioner Alcorn, Commissioner Angry, Commissioner Bailey,
Present.
Commissioner Bierman, Commissioner Bodie, Commissioner Chapman, Commissioner Cummings, Commissioner DeFerranti,
Here.
Commissioner Fields,
Here.
Commissioner Glass,
Here.
Commissioner Green, Commissioner Hardy, Commissioner Heiser, Commissioner Harity, Commissioner Hudson is online. Commissioner Karantonis.
Here.
Commissioner LeBlanc. Here. Commissioner Lusk. Commissioner Nash. Commissioner Palchik. Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Sains.
Here.
Commissioner Cyberling.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. We will move into item 3, which is adoption of action items, and we have a series of items here. First, is our extension of our auditor engagement. So Mr. Fugate, excuse me. So over to you.
Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer.
All right.
I think Craig, if you
You
get
get for a few minutes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Get a brown.
We have resolution 26 to extend the contract for our auditor, which has a renewable year. We've been satisfied with the auditor so far and see no reason not to exercise the last renewal year.
The thought is that we would do these
I'll do them separately.
separately. Is certainly with the auditor. Folks probably have worked with this company before. I don't know that we're up for regular reconsideration at this stage. Is there a motion on
Move for approval. Second.
moved and seconded on extension of the auditor engagement, which is P 2626? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next action item is 2627, the annual budget programs. To you, Mr. Tiger.
Thank you. In your handouts are these slides. For the benefit of those online, I will share them on here as well. Okay. This has been a very turbulent time for budgeting, and since we last discussed the budget in October 2025, we've had to deal with changes to the federal budget, including government shutdowns. We've had to deal with the delays in passing a new state budget, which is still not completely adopted. The General Assembly, of course, has passed a budget, but the governor hasn't signed it yet, and we don't yet know the extent of the amendments that she might suggest. We've also been continuing to deal with the consequences of the cuts to our Ryan White program, starting earlier in FY25 and then continuing through FY26. And of course, all of the local budget processes as well. So it is with great relief that I say that we're proposing to continue all of our existing programs. And it is a real testament to the staff here that we've been able to be as efficient and economical as possible in the operation of these programs, recover as much grant funding as possible for these programs, and try to relieve as much burden on locality contributions as possible. I want to thank all of my staff, but especially Linda Tenney, who's here with us tonight. We're doing so much heavy lifting to keep an extremely complicated budget going, balanced in current fiscal year and preparing this budget for FY27. So the first thing just to underscore is a continuation of all of our existing programs, of which we're very proud and which are very successful. And I'm happy to go into detail on any of those, but that's what that slide is about. On the slides here. Okay. Under proposed new action items, we conducted strategic planning work sessions in the areas of housing, energy, workforce, and AI I appreciate everybody who participated in those. I know that was a lot of extra time during the year in addition to these meetings, but it really helped us to form a lot of consensus around some of the items of interest. And after starting with over 100 items that came out of those work sessions, narrowing it down to 48 going into the retreat, and then narrowing those 48 down to 14, you see here on this slide. They fell out mostly in the areas of housing, energy, and workforce. There was one that really resonated on AI, which is to help identify and share best practices that localities could use. And then some on workforce and retraining in general, even outside of local government workforces. But most of them are in the areas of housing, energy, and general workforce. And the ones that seemed to get the most traction were in the area of housing. So when we look at the items here, the type of work that would be done in these areas, they really fall into kind of three general buckets. One is communication and legislative, things like developing messaging or coordinating legislative strategies. Another one is really in the substance of housing itself, like the Housing Policy Working Group, or the substance of energy, like creating a consortium for energy efficiency, or the substance of workforce, like identifying new trades created by AI. We have existing staff that can work on some of these, but we need to fund their hours to do those things instead of something that might otherwise be grant funded, or that used to be grant funded in the case of Ryan White. And so initially, the proposal that we put together would add a communications and legislative position to work at some of these things, and would assign part of 2 existing staff members' hours to work on the others. Essentially, we would be making progress on all 14 of these items instead of just having to choose 1 or 2 major initiatives. And remember, going into this, we weren't really sure whether we would come out saying what we want to do is start a whole new program in something, or whether it is buy a piece of equipment that everybody shares, or something in between. Probably wasn't going to be one of those. It was probably going to be something in between. And what we're able to do here, basically, because of what these action items turned out to be, is really try to make progress on all of them. And that doesn't mean that we'll necessarily spend the same amount of time on all of these, because as we talked about at the retreat, we need to vet whether these are all feasible, whether they are being done by anybody else, whether NVRC continues to be in the best position to do them, and whether the cost of doing them fits with the funding that we expect to have. So what we're saying is we would pursue all 14 of these to some degree. And for some of them, that might mean spending a lot of time on something that only NVRC could do. And for some of these, it might be saying, well, you know, we've spent 5 hours on this and it's clear that it's already being taken care of by others and we don't need to spend any more time on it. So that's the idea. And again, what we're talking about here is staff time for all of these things. We're not talking about buying a piece of equipment or launching a whole new program at this time. Now, since I initially put together this proposal, I've been able to talk with many of you. I've gotten feedback from the CAOs and from some of the other folks involved, like local legislative liaisons. And I'm going to suggest for tonight's purposes that we hold off on that new communications and legislative position so that I can continue to have those conversations and provide additional information about exactly what that position would do and what it would do relative to positions that the localities already have, especially in the legislative area. We are the only regional organization that doesn't have this kind of position, or the only comparator regional organization that doesn't have this kind of position. So I think it would be needed anyway, even if we weren't doing these new things. But combined, I think it's definitely an important priority. I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with it, though. So I'm suggesting, as I propose this, that it be without that position for tonight. On the next page, there is information about a study that the business community has approached George Mason's Center for Regional Analysis to perform. The Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce has a proposal from George Mason to do an assessment of local permitting timelines and processes with the goal of trying to reduce time to market, trying to reduce the time between a development application and approval. Now, there's so much we could say about that sentence. We don't have time for another work session tonight to dive into all of those nuances, but suffice it to say, there is a combination of perception and reality around the time that it takes to complete these development processes. And then there is also perception and reality around factors other than local government, like bank financing, like the quality of developer applications, like concerns from neighbors and others in the community. And so on the one hand, we know that the local government is not 100% of the issue when it comes to the time it takes to build. But on the other hand, we are part of the time. And some part of the time is really justified. It's essentially the way democracy needs to work. And some of the time possibly could be improved. So there seems to be a lot of consensus around the goal of improvements, but also a lot of concern about what this study would actually be like for localities to participate in, how their results would be framed and reported, and making sure everybody's comfortable with the details is going to take some more time. So the principal from George Mason, who's Dr. Terry Clower, and the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce president, will be meeting with the chief administrative officers at their next meeting here in August to go through a lot of these finer points. And although we had proposed that NVRC contribute $25,000 to this study as a way of sort of proving that localities are willing to put some skin in the game, we're going to defer that request again until we're able to have more conversations around exactly how this study would go.
Oh,
And I'll just say, both those, we had some discussion during the executive committee and, you mentioned August was the initial convening. There's certainly a decent chance we might come back in July and try and move forward on this, but that's not guaranteed. And so we thought, at least in the executive committee discussion, that it would be best to hold this, work this through over the coming days and weeks and get all set to consider it either in July, not a guarantee, or, we still haven't concluded that, but we shouldn't move forward with it without having a fulsome discussion.
just a question. This is mesmerizing because it's really extremely complex and academically, typically very difficult to approach. And I see a lot of value that we can bring in because we are the conveners of bringing the complexity more closer to is this study scoped? So is there a scope of work already?
Yes, there's a long scope and then there's a one pager, and happy to circulate that. I think it's also open to some discussion about some of those points that are in the scope, but because that first pass was essentially written after input from the business community, but not from localities. And part of our concern is that if this study were to take place without the localities collaboration, it may not be as productive.
Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, the number one problem with housing is the dealing with zoning, permitting, and all the stuff that we have to care, and then all the other duties of care that we have.
Yeah.
Building has to have a sewer, right?
Right.
So
And even if we don't make a cash contribution, localities would need to contribute staff time. Their building officials and others would have to be interviewed. Elected officials would also benefit from being interviewed, and data would need to be provided by the localities. So part of this is making sure that the CAOs are comfortable with what their staff would be asked to do, and part of it is whether we want to contribute cash. So we want to keep that conversation going. So I would defer that item as part of tonight's proposal.
Only thing I would just add is I'm sure everybody in the room within the last year has had a developer say it's all fine, it's all done. And then you actually go and have a conversation with the developer and there's significant issues that the developer has not resolved. I'm not saying we don't love development, but at the same time, I bet everybody in this room has probably had one of those instances. And so that sort of feels like a proof point for Tapas and the reason for considering it, but we do it thoroughly. And if you can share around the scope, I think that would probably help.
Sure. Okay, so on the following page, proposed expenditures, these are just the new items since the preliminary budget was approved in October. The communications legislative position I just described, which we are removing from the proposal tonight. The existing staff time that I described, the contribution to the study, which we're removing from the proposal tonight. There's some money for the completion of the strategic planning process, including creating the actual strategic plan document and refreshing the website and brand based on the mission and the goals that come out of the strategic plan. And then the last major item that I want to flag tonight is our proposal to add a finance manager position. NVRC is one of only 3 of the 21 planning districts in Virginia that does not have a finance position like this. And the other 2 are the second and third smallest PDCs in the state. We are the largest by population. So this is something that is not only a best practice, and we shouldn't do it just because everybody else is doing it, but it is a best practice. But we also have such a complex and growing budget that I think it is really, I think it would be irresponsible of us not to ensure that we have some redundancy, that we have some succession planning, that we have some modernization of our processes, some documentation of new things that we've recently taken on, like our IGSA work with the military, to make sure that we have a very clear manual for how that's governed. And we want to protect all the good work that we're doing and all of the financial strength that my predecessor and all of you helped build. And so I'm recommending this position to basically to ensure that we keep a good thing going and that we don't get into trouble. Paired with that is the one-time development of policies and procedures that we don't currently have that would benefit from some professional assistance. So the idea is that we get some consulting support one time to build these best practice policies, and this new position can help implement some of those policies and also the systems that go along with them, like ACH, for example, versus paper checks, or a new tracking system that might be needed for the IGSAs or those sorts of things. So the 131 would come from the new strategic initiatives funding. The 105 for the policy and procedure development would come from our unrestricted reserve. So it's not part of the revenue and expenditures that balance in the regular operating budget.
I have a question.
Yes,
You said one time, so once the consulting is done, that's it.
that's it.
You don't keep them on board as a retainer for, you
Yeah.
can reach out to it anytime.
They're not embedded consultants. They're just projects consultants. And it may not be 105. We are approximating 35 for finance, 35 for human resources, 35 for procurement. But some of that might overlap and some of it might not reach that estimate. And so we wouldn't spend all of that.
What are some of the deliverables associated with that? What are you looking for?
A procurement manual, an IGSA manual, the implementation of purchase cards and a policy to go along with that. We don't currently have purchasing cards for staff. We have basically 2 company credit cards, if you will. And so we don't have the ability to let staff make those purchases and reconcile that automatically. And then.
Does that answer your question?
That's
Great. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Craig, we did discuss the HR policy manual too, but when's the last time that was updated?
Our employee policies and procedures manual was last updated wholesale in 2010. There have been a few additions since then, like military leave, but for the most part, our accruals table for leave is from 1975. It doesn't make it wrong, but it means that perhaps we need to,
Move it to the
update.
30th.
Take a look.
We need to double
Yeah.
down on it or update.
And not to put you on the spot, but I thought that
Yeah,
was
thank you,
important.
thank you.
I mean, the only thing on unrestricted reserve, I believe the total that we have in unrestricted reserve right now is 2 million.
Approximately $2 million right now.
So just for scale of question, that's right.
Okay, the last point part here is the meeting room refresh. So as you know, we have a lot of trouble with our current meeting AV setup. The cameras at the moment are not even working right now, and you can see the state of the chairs that you're sitting in. This is not always a priority for every organization, and I've spent most of the time I've been here sort of joking about how it'd be great to replace the chairs, but obviously that's not a priority. As we took a look at the budget though, and noted our $100,000 capital reserve, and also noted the really outsized role that meetings play in NVRC's mission. And we have a lot of VIPs here, like yourselves, like installation base, commanders, military, installation commanders, foreign visitors, on a weekly or monthly basis. We want a room that we can be proud of and a room that works. And the goal of the refresh would be that you could walk in with a laptop and start a meeting. And you don't have to literally read a binder of information to figure out how to do that by cobbling together multiple systems that weren't really intended to work together. And for the furniture, that's simply replacing these chairs. With that said, though, we do want to provide some additional information about what would come out of those refreshes, the equipment that we'd be able to purchase and what it would do. And so I'm also deferring that item from tonight.
Just one thought that came to mind. So we're going to use the capital reserve. What's our policy to replace that money?
So every year we put a portion of the year-end funds back into the reserve, and there's a policy, there's a formula for how to do that. Yeah, both the unrestricted reserve and the capital reserve. Then we have an additional emergency reserve that's intended to provide certain number of months of operating expenses. And these three reserves are for different purposes. The unrestricted reserve is really to provide for cash flow for purchases that may vary over the course of the year. Sometimes we get more revenue, sometimes we have more expenses, to deal with your sort of general funding malaise, like a federal government shutdown that interrupts things for a little bit but doesn't cause a catastrophe, and to make unexpected or unanticipated purchases that are one time versus ongoing. The emergency reserve is if we had a catastrophic funding problem and we basically were not able to pay our bills without going into the reserve. And some of the PDCs and other parts of the state actually had to do that during the federal shutdown. We didn't because we had other strengths and this unrestricted reserve. And then the capital reserve is for equipment replacement, mostly computers and furniture.
So it might be that as we get more information on that piece, it might be that policy is a useful thing for us to take a look at, just to see how much we do.
Sure, I can bring that back as well.
Good.
Okay, so on the next page, which says additional state budget variables. The first version of this title that I typed was known unknowns, which are basically what we think will be in the state budget, but we can't bank on that until it's signed by the governor. So we do have $6.6 million statewide to backfill the cuts for the Ryan White program, but those were $20 million of cuts. So it is an extremely important contribution from the General Assembly, but it is not going to return us to the state we were in before. In fact, we have to recognize that the Ryan White program now exists in a new normal, which is a lower level of funding than it previously received. To kind of recap here, Ryan White used to be funded primarily by rebates from the pharmaceutical companies and from an appropriation by Congress. Both of those have been reduced in the last year, but the federal appropriation actually not by a huge amount. It was on the pharmaceutical side where there was a mismatch between the bills that the State Department of Health was submitting to get the rebates and the rebates that the pharmaceutical company felt were appropriate. When that mismatch was discovered, Virginia had essentially been overpaid by tens of millions of dollars over the course of 2 years and had to repay that money. When the dust settled on the last year of negotiations between the state and the pharmaceutical company, we are left with $16 million of debt to repay statewide. And so that's going to come out of reduced rebates going forward. We have received a lower level of funding ever since. And the good news is that we have gotten a new contract for that lower level again. In other words, we are not going to get more cuts, but we could not get any more money from the state without going to the General Assembly. So NBRC really led a coalition of all of the Ryan White program administrators statewide to ask the General Assembly to backfill that cut. And some things happened in the budget process you may have read about. It became not really front and center anymore, even though we got a lot of traction in the beginning. The Senate version had $12 million. The Senate also had more revenue to use in their budget. And so I think for us to come out of this with 6.6 million is really good. That is a lot more money than zero. It's less money than 20, but we're never getting 20 again. So,
Never say never.
so, well, it's a different, we're in a different situation now, and this is what's really important. The Ryan White program is no longer a private / federal program. It is now a state / local / private / federal program. And we have to educate the General Assembly on the importance of taking ownership of this program. And instead of resenting that we have to plug a hole, really being proud that this is something that we can do. It's very effective. We have a 93% viral suppression rate in Northern Virginia through this program of wraparound services. And we have to take ownership of that and roll with it. It's not fair to expect that localities are just going to pick up the slack for what was a unintentional, but still a state situation. And so that's going to be a process of sort of reframing this from the General Assembly plugging a hole to the General Assembly taking over the program. And if they're not willing to do that, then we're going to have to reassess how this program works. All right, so all this is to say there's $6.6 million, assuming the governor signs it, but we don't know how much of that will come to NVRC. It would be an average of $472,000 if they gave an equal amount to each Ryan White program that's still left. About 10 of them are out of business now as a result of these funding cuts, and there are 14 left. But we might get more because we have a higher population with more patients. We might get less because they use some other formula. And then once we know that number, we don't know how much of that will be allowed for administrative expenses versus patient services. And although we want as much as possible to go to patient services, we also cannot provide patient services without staff to administer the program. So we think there will be some kind of positive number that will come out of this for us, but we don't know what it is yet. There's also money in the budget that was just passed by the General Assembly to increase the statewide funding for regional water supply planning by $750,000. There are 25 what are called regional planning units or regional planning organizations that are responsible for doing the regional water supply plans that are required by state law. We are one of them. Many other PDCs perform that role as well. If DEQ gives the same amount of money to each, we would get $30,000, which might be able to offset some of the general fund money that is currently being spent for the position that does that work. So again, we expect a positive number. We're not sure exactly what it is. The last piece of it is that we had asked for an increase in the state funding to be a PDC. We get $191,000 a year just to exist. It doesn't even pay our rent. It doesn't even pay most of our positions and all of the fringe and indirect expenses that go along with them. So we asked that be increased, and we gave a very careful explanation for a number that would make sense based on average PDC costs. We asked the state to pay for half of it. Localities would pay for at least half of it. In Northern Virginia, localities pay for dramatically more than half. And ultimately, that budget amendment was not successful. There was, however, a separate budget amendment to provide an additional $190,000, which is just less than double the funding for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission only. And although we have no interest in seeing their funding reduced, we believe everybody should get additional funding. PDCs provide essential regional infrastructure that the state leverages for routine programs and for emergencies. And we think it's important that PDCs be there when we get the call from the state. And we don't know what that call will be 5 years from now, but that's the point of having that infrastructure in place. So we will use the Hampton Roads funding as a precedent for the value of increasing funding to PDCs and continue that advocacy. But there is virtually no chance the governor will intervene to amend that line item between now and Monday or Tuesday. So I'm listing it as
Sure.
it exists, but is not very likely that.
I think Senator Lucas might have had something to say.
Yes, again.
And if you want one of us to call the governor and Senator Lucas in succession, I would not be one volunteering for that. But I'll just leave it right there.
Okay, so the last line on this slide says that based on the numbers we get back from the state budget, we will have to make some adjustments. We expect they will be good adjustments, and we will probably have to bring back amendments to you possibly in July, possibly in September to redo the math. So that takes me to the last slide, and basically, we've got 10 localities that have put additional strategic initiatives funding in their adopted budgets, 3 that have not. We've been in discussions with those 3 localities now that we know what the strategic initiatives are. It may be possible to get some of that funding now. It may not work out. So you see asterisks next to the 3 numbers there that would require additional action by the governing body. The proposal for you tonight is the budget document in your packet without the communications and legislative position, without the George Mason study, and without the separate resolution for the meeting room refresh. We will come back with additional information about those 3 items and about what the General Assembly and Governor do. And we will propose any necessary amendments at the July and or September meeting.
So first, seems to me the last, all of the slides, if you have questions, open the floor for questions before we move towards a motion. We just have some discussion now. I think it's important to note that when you said the NVRC led the Ryan White advocacy work, that may mean you did a lot of that work, or maybe you and one of the colleagues on the team who engaged, and thank you for that advocacy work. Certainly, we probably all have heard from providers in our localities, but who did the lead? Was that mostly you, or was it a combination of you and some of our team?
Yeah, thank you. So it starts with the fact that NVRC has been doing Ryan White longer than the Virginia Department of Health has been doing Ryan White. And so the strength of our program itself is the most important form of advocacy we could have had. We were respected as a leader in the Ryan White community in Virginia. Our Director of Human Services, Carol Huell, is the leader of that team. Our primary program manager, Mark Baker, is also a leader in the quality assurance activities of Ryan White around the state. So he's the co-chair of the committee that does the quality assurance oversight and best practices. We are the only Ryan White administrator of the database program that's used by participants if they choose to use that program. And Sadiksha Dahal, who's our CareWare administrator here, has also become a leader around the state in that regard. And Rashmi Puranik is our finance specialist for this program, who's been with NVRC for 25 years and knows all of these numbers backwards and forwards and ensures that we stretch every dollar as far as possible. So without those 4 staff members and those who have gone before them, we wouldn't be in a position to advocate for this program at all. Yes, I did go to Richmond many times and have many conversations with members of the General Assembly and with VDH, and would like to think that helped. But I couldn't have done that if we didn't have a program to be proud of. NVRC is also in a position to help lead across the other programs because we are the only planning district commission that administers this program. We're the only governmental agency that administers this program besides VDH itself. So we sort of have this unique combination of understanding the clinical needs, understanding the administrative needs, and understanding the politics. And we could bring that all together to help move this along. Quality Virginia also did a lot of work on this advocacy for this program. Daily Planet in Richmond, which is another one of the programs, was also really key. And then last, I have to give credit to quite a few members of the General Assembly who said from the beginning, you don't need to sell us on this. We understand why this is important, and we're going to do what we can. There were 5 budget amendments to add money to this program.
Wow.
And so 2 of them were the ones that we wrote, and then others, some other people were doing them without even knowing that we were doing them. So I think that speaks to the broad consensus in the General Assembly that this money was important. Unfortunately, the budget process got derailed by some other things that have nothing to do with Ryan White. And like 1,000 other programs that are on the edges of their seats waiting to see what happens with the budget, Ryan White was also affected.
Sure.
But thank you.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. I open it, current Commissioner Science.
No, Brett, thank you for your efforts and the team getting to where we're at. in this budget process. I think when it's all said and done with the budget and the General Assembly, I would encourage us to tell this story. Because this is very important money that's helping a population that needs help.
Mhm.
So I think we need to do a better job of telling the story and telling it from beginning, middle, and end, everything that's been going on, and unfortunately, the clerical error and all this stuff. So it does, one, it doesn't happen again, hopefully, that's been fixed, but two, to get more attention on it, so hopefully more people will start paying attention to this funding and hopefully do some right things to get more funding into it. Maybe we'll get some other entities out there besides the state, pay attention to maybe, help out with this cause.
Yeah, thank you. The relationship that the programs had with VDH under the previous administration was not particularly collaborative. It was very transactional and it was very much based on wait and see what the state is willing to give you. This administration is being much more collaborative, in fairness, partially out of necessity because it's a crisis situation, but also I think out of intent to be more collaborative. And so we've already met with VDH several times and will continue to help try to come up with a path forward together. I think telling the story is a really important part of that because it's the only way to get the General Assembly to shift their understanding of this program. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that a communications position at NDRC could help with all storytelling for all of the programs that we do, including this one.
Yeah, because if it tell that story, get it out there, maybe some entities might, will open up their generous pocketbooks.
So we'll think about that as we think about the position. And also there's, each of you, I just priced out a short video very short video for $750, 3 or 4 minutes with the key people that you just indicated would have to cost significantly more, but it still could be under $10,000. And folks in this room may know, and that's just not to act on that, but at least to give an action sort of teaser to what we could do.
So there's 6.6 million in the first of the 2 years of the state budget and 6.6 in the second year. And then we don't know what will come next. So I think the general idea is that we will use the first year to stabilize, try to use the second year to get back some of the lost services and geographic coverage, and then use both of those years to tell the story and work with the General Assembly on a plan for what happens in year 3 and beyond.
Yes.
I as we go back and assess that position, communications and legislative position, I see that when you talk about responsibilities, this is in fact, as Mr. Chairman was saying, an example of what that person would be responsible for to breed the consistency in getting the level of support that we need.
I agree.
Well, thank you. And I think it's important to acknowledge, the population is key to the last page in local contributions. And I think the right steps are being taken to be mindful of the fiscal moment we're in. Many of us, perhaps those with lots of data centers are in a slightly different fiscal moment, but that doesn't mean there's endless supply either there. So, but I know that each locality is in different space. Any other questions? We will, so just to, but we will defer the latter P 2628 on audiovisual equipment and furniture. We'll defer that one. I don't think we need to necessarily take action to defer it, but we will act on adoption of the fiscal 27 annual budget and programs. And to restate what Craig just said, we will be acting on that and referring to the third to last slide that talks about the proposed expenditures since the October 2025 preliminary budget without the 25,000 for the local at this time, without local development permitting timeline and process assessment from the GMU study. And at this time, without the communications legislative manager position. Have I stated it correctly? That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? And this is, if you haven't already asked questions, if you got concerns, go to it. And I think that certainly on the local contributions, I'm grateful for everyone contributing. And I think we'll all be engaged as we go forward. But any other questions, concerns at this time? Hearing none, I'm not gonna wait too long. All in favor of that motion, seconded by,
Aye.
I think, Vice Chair Bailey, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Craig, for working us through that.
Indeed.
We will not, we'll just leave. We won't even defer. We'll just leave and not take action on P 26-28, and we will move to P 26-29. It's over to Craig for a little context, which is election of officers for fiscal year 2027.
So if you go past the budget in your handouts and past the AV resolution, you'll see the resolution that lists the nominees for officers of the commission. The nominating committee has nominated our chair, vice chair, and treasurer to serve additional terms. And adopting the resolution would elect those officers.
I move approval.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Grateful for the chance to continue. I know Vice Chair Bailey and Commissioner Sains are also grateful. Just to say out loud context for those who haven't been. Typically, with the exception of former Falls Church Mayor Tartar, who was served for 4 years, you would serve for 2 years, and then our bylaws say at that point that you stop. And I think it is important that we've added, for just to say out loud, Commissioner LeBlanc has joined the executive commission. So, for those who are newer, just keep asking questions at the right time now, whenever you want. And it had been a goal before I was chair and had 2 kids under 3 to come to each locality. I'm not saying I won't do that next year, but I am trying to stay married and be a good father this year, and also I have to get reelected if the voters will let me do that, in addition to being chair. So thank you for the chance to serve, and don't be shy if you have questions of any type. And so now we will move on to the next item, which is Go Virginia. Craig, you want to describe that?
Sure. Resolution 26-30 authorizes NVRC to renew our agreement to serve as the support organization for Go Virginia's Regional Council for Region 7. The support organization is basically the fiscal agent and the staffing agent. In our case, the operations on a day-to-day basis and the programmatic staffing, we outsource to SkillSource. So we are handling the money and serving as the fiscal agent. We're not involved in the day-to-day programmatic decisions about how to vet applications and how to award grants and things like that. We do have a representative on the regional council who is now Commissioner Chapman, and Commissioner Lusk, who had been our representative, moved into a different elected official seat on that council. So we essentially have 2 representatives, and our former chair, Marty Noe, is also on that council. So although NVRC doesn't have a formal role in the grants themselves, we certainly do have representation from our perspective, if you will. Mostly, though, this is an administrative arrangement. The contracts are expiring and need to be renewed, and this authorizes us to do that once they are ready.
Thank you. Is there questions, concerns? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Move for approval of 26-30. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Sines. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passed. Any noes? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. On to the executive director's report. Still can't believe that's been Mr. Fugate. Mr. Fugate.
So I've got a lot of good news to share with you, and I didn't do these reports during our strategic planning meetings because we were trying to cram so much into our work session. So happy to be able to share some of these activities over the last month or so. But first, I want to just go back to April because I want to underscore that we were one of the first to publish new data that came out on the impacts to the federal workforce as a result of the administration's actions last year. And so this is really just a shout out to Jill Caniff in our demography shop and the NOVA dashboard that she maintains, and it's chock full of all kinds of really essential data for this region. This is a good example of being able to help focus on the real takeaways from the data, which in this case are that Northern Virginia lost about 18% of the federal jobs in this region, which represented about 1 in every 20 federal jobs nationwide. You can read a lot more at novaregionaldashboard.com. So moving into the last month, I want to give a shout out to our Coastal Program Manager, Rebecca Murphy, for doing a presentation at the big Chesapeake Bay Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee workshop in Shepherdstown on salinization. This is, again, one of those many environmental programs in which NVRC is doing a lot of quiet but important work that most of the population and frankly, most localities don't have to think a lot about. And so in this case, it's the effects of salinization on water quality and future trends and future mitigation opportunities. And this workshop will produce a report with those recommendations. On June 10th, Dale Medeiros, our senior regional planner, and I participated in a seminar in Montreal put on by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and paid for by OECD as well, which focused on industrial transition. And that means different things in different regions, but we've been talking a lot in our work sessions here about the shift towards an AI economy, about the shift away from a federal government centric economy. And so in our case, those were some of the examples that we talked about. There was a lot of interesting discussion about data centers and different perspectives that different regions have based on their history with data centers and based on their governmental and economic and social approaches to regulation. We focus so much on land use, and other regions focus a lot more on what is the technology doing, as opposed to what is the building doing, which was an interesting contrast. And I could talk about a lot of other interesting exchanges that we had there, but this is an ongoing conversation sponsored by OECD. On June 11th, I went to the Northern Virginia Regional Readiness Summit on behalf of NVRC. This was put on by the State Secretary of Public Safety to try to bring together representatives from the localities, from state agencies, from Maryland and DC. And I think we may have been the only regional organization, certainly the only PDC that was there. And so it was an opportunity to think about the roles that we each play during emergencies, before, during, and after. We did 2 tabletop exercises with different disaster scenarios to really sort of test what would each of us be able to provide and what gaps might remain. I did a similar, I should have had a slide on this. I did a similar one of these workshops sponsored by the Secretary of Commerce and Trade about economic development. So I appreciate that the new administration seems to be putting a lot of emphasis on listening to stakeholder input and trying to identify both best practices that we should double down on and gaps that need to be filled. So hope to have the opportunity to do more of these in other subject areas as well. I'm pleased to say that after a long RFP process, including 43 proposals, we awarded a contract on June 15th to Guidehouse to conduct the AI Economy Action Plan research and writing, and put on the AI Economy Action Summit and develop an implementation framework based on it. So the idea here is to try to zero in on what would make Northern Virginia the most competitive region for AI in some way. We want to see what our assets are. We want to see what our opportunities are. We don't necessarily want to be all things when it comes to AI, but we want to do what we're best at, what we can differentiate ourselves in, and what will create the strongest economy for the businesses and the residents and the governments of Northern Virginia. So far, the coalition behind this, which was initially launched by the Fairfax County Department of Economic Initiatives, has raised $100,000 from a private company to get started. We were hoping to raise the entire project cost at the beginning, but for this one investor. The others would like to see kind of what comes out of the first part of this. So we have enough money to get started with phase one. We awarded a contract to do that. We hope that will lead towards additional contributions to do the other portions of the project. I hosted the CAOs here in this room last week, and the primary topic was going through the budget. So I should have maybe said this more explicitly before, but all of these new ideas and new initiatives that we discussed tonight, I've also discussed with the CAOs. They certainly have varying levels of questions and support and concerns, but that is part of this budget process as well. I spoke at the Go Virginia Regional Council retreat a few days ago. This was an opportunity for existing established members to help mentor some of the new members and to provide orientation to the new members and to refocus on the grant criteria, the purposes of the program, and some of the challenges that we've faced. And I think there's more to discuss when it comes to Go Virginia in terms of the sustainability of the administrative model, which is a fancy way of saying we are barely breaking even on providing this support to Go Virginia, and I think we need to reassess that. But also the way that the grants are approved. The grants have to be approved by this regional council, but also by the state board, the state Go Virginia board. And sometimes there's a disconnect in how those applications are considered at each of those levels. So I think there's more to talk about with Go Virginia. It's definitely a program that has provided tens of millions of dollars in very important economic development funding, but some disagreement maybe about whether that's being administered as effectively as possible. We've got 2 webinars coming up on best practices in Europe that might be applicable to Northern Virginia. This is part of our ongoing international partnership work led by Dale Medeiros. One is on July 15th regarding forever chemicals or PFAS chemicals, and the other is on July 29th regarding electric vehicle charging. You can read more about these webinars on our website, and feel free to sign up. Finally, in the midst of all of this other budget discussion, we last October put in the preliminary budget the ability to fulfill to fill the solid waste coordinator position that was left vacant when our longtime program coordinator Debbie Spiliotopoulos retired last year. And so we've been able to keep that in the budget, and we're ready now to fill that half-time position. If you know anybody with solid waste backgrounds and we're looking for somebody with some technical expertise in the area of solid waste management, please encourage them to check out the job listing at novaregion.org. The deadline is July 3rd. That is some of the highlights of what we've been doing over the last month or so, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's awesome.
That is a lot, and we've had a lot of interaction, workshop type stuff. Sometimes it's nice just to hear good stuff that's happening without us doing it. But questions from anyone on all that? And they don't have to, you don't have to make them up. Yes.
Not a question, just a comment. We are doing a lot of stuff. But I want to say that we are so relevant in this region and the work that we do. And it elevates each year as we serve our jurisdictions. And so just thank you for keeping us in the forefront of the citizens' minds, but most of all to our CEOs, CEO, county execs. I think that's important too, to make sure that they feel like they're a part of the decisions that we're making and they're actively helping us to make those decisions. I think that's essential with what we're faced with as it relates to funding and as it relates to what the needs are right now.
Thank you for that. Needed a bit of positivity after 8:30. So, and that is well said. And think about the the different challenges of federal administration and the reality that Northern Virginia's representation on the key committees in this General Assembly is lower than it has been in a while. And so not an easy moment and important, and have to continue the work and hope that is that works. Any other executive directors? And that, by the way, was my chair's report. But unless questions, it certainly is a moment. It's hard to take your eyes away from the reflecting pool, among other things. The adoption of the minutes from May, yes, go
May
ahead.
I just note first, please, the financial reports are also included.
Thank you.
And for the month of May, we had income over expenses of $41,000, so doing fine on the financial report.
Great, I'm really glad you said that because there are a couple of 3 pay periods in 1 month. 2 of those, I think, were earlier in this year, and so glad you mentioned that. And it is our fiduciary duty to stay focused on this, and we learned that from long past NBRC finances. So that, yes.
And on the minutes, Commissioner Glass should be noted as present at that meeting for the adoption of the minutes.
With that incorporated into the motion, passing the minutes with Commissioner Glass is noted as present, I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. The other 2 items are other matters and adjournment. Is there anything else for the good of the order that anyone has? I'm mindful we started a few minutes late. I'm also mindful that different ones of us drive different lengths of time from different places. And super grateful for those who make long trips to be here. It is sometimes elusive it's the connections you have that can make a big difference. It's sometimes elusive to find those nuggets of action, but